The story begins with the introduction of Clarissa James, a black woman in her mid-30s who had built a reputation as a dependable and nurturing nanny. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Having worked her way through community college and balancing multiple jobs before finding her true calling, caring for children, her sense of responsibility, paired with natural warmth, earned her the trust of many families. Yet nothing in her life thus far had prepared her for the world she was about to enter when she was hired by the Lennox family, a household whose name carried power, money, and influence across generations. The Lennoxes were billionaires by inheritance. Old money with sprawling estates and a network of influence that stretched from politics to philanthropy. Their only daughter, Victoria Lennox, was 6 years old, a child, shielded from the world, yet shaped by it. Dressed in couture and educated in private settings, but missing the ordinary joys of childhood. Her parents, often absent, entrusted her care to staff, and Clarissa became the central figure in her small world. Clarissa was drawn to Victoria's fragility. Though spoiled with material goods, the child was desperately lonely, prone to night terrors and hesitant to trust new faces. Clarissa, with her patience and instinctive ability to soothe, became the one constant in the girl's life. For months, Clarissa settled into the rhythm of life in the Lennox mansion. Days began with quiet breakfasts, private tutors arriving, and afternoons in the manicured gardens where Victoria played under Clarissa's careful eye. The staff respected Clarissa because she brought a level of calmness to the often chaotic household. The heiress's parents, especially Mrs. Lennox, valued Clarissa for her discretion and professionalism. Although her presence was sometimes treated as invisible in the grand halls of wealth, everything shifted one quiet evening. Clarissa went to check on Victoria before bed, following the usual routine of reading stories, fluffing pillows, and ensuring her nightlight glowed softly. But when she pulled back the covers to tuck the child in, her eyes froze at the sight of crimson stains smeared across the pale pink silk pajamas. The metallic scent was faint but undeniable blood. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she simply stared, disbelieving. The heiress's tiny hands clutched the blanket nervously, her wide eyes avoided Clarissa's questioning gaze. Clarissa's training as a caregiver made her first thought concern for injury. She quickly examined the child, her hands trembling slightly, asking gently if she was hurt. Victoria flinched at her touch, whispering only fragments. "Don't tell. Mommy will be angry." It happened sometimes. There were no visible cuts, no nosebleed, no immediate explanation. The stains were fresh, yet Victoria refused to explain further. Clarissa was torn between respecting the child's fear and her own rising panic. That night, Clarissa could not sleep. The image of blood on silk pajamas haunted her. In her heart, she felt an urgent truth. Something was wrong, something deeper than what appeared on the surface. Her mind raced with possibilities in this, hidden injury, or something more sinister. She thought of the whispered fragments of Victoria's visible fear. Clarissa had been raised to never ignore her instincts, and her instincts screamed that the child was hiding something painful. The next morning, Clarissa approached Mrs. Lennox delicately, choosing her words with care. The heiress's mother, however, brushed it aside with an impatient wave. "Children have accidents, Clarissa. You don't need to make a scene." Her tone carried the arrogance of wealth. Dismissing concerns as though they were trivial, Mr. Lennox, even less present, was unavailable for conversation. Clarissa felt silenced, but her conscience refused to let her rest. Over the following days, Clarissa observed Victoria closely. The child often woke with night sweats, sometimes with new stains on her clothing or sheets, sometimes with tears on her cheeks. Clarissa documented everything quietly, journaling times, dates, and what she saw. What struck her most was the little girl's fear of speaking, her reluctance to share. Her constant glances over her shoulder, as though afraid someone might overhear. Slowly, Victoria began to open up, but only in fragments. "Sometimes it hurts," she whispered once. "Another time I can't tell. It's a secret." Clarissa's heart broke with every half-confession. She feared abuse but had no proof, only suspicions. Reporting without evidence could not only cost her job, but also result in losing access to the child she was desperate to protect. Still, her loyalty was to truth, not to wealth. One evening, as Clarissa prayed over her notes, she made a quiet vow. She would uncover what was happening, no matter the cost. Her investigation led her deeper into the rhythms of the household. She noticed how Mrs. Lennox often avoided her daughter, delegating maternal duties entirely to staff. She observed that certain staff members grew unusually tense whenever Victoria mentioned nighttime. Then came the breakthrough. One night, Clarissa heard muffled crying through the hallway and, following it quietly, discovered Victoria in her room, clutching her stomach, blood once again staining her pajamas. Clarissa pressed gently, and this time with tears streaming. The little girl finally broke down. "It's not me," Victoria sobbed. "It comes from here," she whispered, pointing not to her stomach, but lower. The innocence of her age clashing with the horror of the revelation. Clarissa's chest tightened. Victoria was experiencing menstruation far too early, a condition known as precocious puberty. Clarissa realized the child's body was developing abnormally fast, likely due to underlying medical or genetic conditions. What appeared as abuse or mystery was actually a silent medical crisis. Clarissa wasted no time. She carried her notes, her observations, and Victoria's confession to a trusted pediatric specialist she knew from her community connections. Quietly, and without the family's initial permission, she arranged for a discreet consultation. The doctor confirmed her suspicions. The heiress was indeed suffering from precocious puberty, a condition that, if left untreated, could damage not only her physical health, but also her psychological well-being. Victoria had been carrying a burden of confusion and shame, exacerbated by her mother's refusal to address it. When Clarissa presented the truth to Mrs. Lennox, the reaction was explosive. At first, Mrs. Lennox accused her of overstepping boundaries, of daring to interfere in matters above her station, but as the medical reports were laid bare, the weight of denial began to crack. Mr. Lennox, forced to confront reality, demanded immediate treatment for his daughter. The staff who had remained silent out of fear of losing their jobs began to confess that they, too, had noticed symptoms but were instructed never to speak. The revelation shocked not only the household, but the wider circle of society when it eventually surfaced. For all their wealth, the Lennoxes had neglected the most basic responsibility, listening to their child's cries for help. Clarissa, the nanny, often overlooked because of her race and her position, had become the one person to see the truth clearly and act upon it. The media, once they learned of the story, painted a portrait of contrast: the glamorous but detached mother, the distant billionaire father, and the black nanny whose compassion and determination exposed the truth. Victoria received medical care, therapy, and most importantly, a newfound sense of trust that someone truly listened to her. Clarissa, though initially fearing she might be dismissed, was instead embraced by Victoria as her anchor. In time, even Mrs. Lennox, humbled by the unfolding events, expressed gratitude, acknowledging that it was Clarissa who had saved her daughter from silent suffering. The story traveled far beyond the mansion walls, resonating with families across the nation. It sparked conversations about childhood health. It's the importance of listening to children, and the way societal biases can blind people to truths presented by those in lesser positions. For Clarissa, the ordeal was both painful and redemptive. She had risked everything: her job, her stability, her peace, for the sake of one child's truth. And in doing so, she proved that integrity, compassion, and courage outweighed wealth and privilege in the years that followed. Victoria grew into a healthier, more confident young woman, always crediting Clarissa as the one who had given her voice when she had none. Clarissa herself went on to advocate publicly for children's health, using her experience to raise awareness about early puberty and the dangers of ignoring children's unspoken cries. The narrative closes with a lasting image: Clarissa holding Victoria's hand, no longer just a nanny, but a symbol of truth and resilience. The Lennox mansion, once a place of silence and denial, now stood as a reminder that money could never replace vigilance, compassion, and the courage to confront reality. Clarissa's truth had stunned them all, but in the end, it had saved a life.